Tech Talk with Matthew Dickerson. Matthew Dickerson. Tech Talk. Sit back and relax. It's time to talk technology.
It is Tech Talk time. We're joined by Matthew Dickerson. Good morning.
A bit tired this morning. Had to get up bright and early just for you and your listeners this morning, Rod.
Yes, it's the Tech Talk Apple today. Big announcements.
Big announcements, and you just know that the trouble that Apple goes to when they do their announcements, they don't do them live anymore. They used to do them live. There used to be people who would sit in the Apple headquarters and there'd be a live process and then everyone would stream from around the world. But of course, COVID put an end to that. So they now spend more money on a production. They even brought in Academy Award winner Octavia Spencer this year and did a little film clip where she was Mother Nature and Apple was talking about all the wonderful things they're doing for their carbon neutrality, and she was playing Mother Nature and giving them a report on how they were going. So it is a major production. I'm sure it's a bigger production than some film studios have, but ultimately it's all about the product. So I've got a few different products to talk about. I'll start off with the iPhone 15 Pro and Pro Max. Now these are the top of the range phones in the Apple range, upgrading from the 14 and 14 Pro and 14 Pro Max, so they haven't become that creative with the names. It's just gone up by one. The big news that everyone was expecting was that the Lightning port is no more. Now, when you watch the streaming, and you can go and watch the recording of that, if you watch that, you would believe that Apple has made this decision all on their own for the betterment of society. The reality is the European Union made them do it because they made a ruling that said every product coming out from 2024 onwards has to have USB-C. So they've conformed to that, USB-C, and that'll be then across the world, all their Apple iPhone 15s across the world, and that's USB 3 on the Pro. They have changed the zoom level on the Pro Max only, not on the Pro, up to 5 times optical zoom, and they've changed the material on the phone from stainless steel to titanium, a bit stronger, a bit lighter, faster chip, A17 Pro chip, and probably the only other thing that people would take some notice of is the switch on the side of the phone that normally goes from silent to ring out loud has now become a button, and that's called an action button, and that action button will allow you to change it from ring to silent or to do other things you might want to do. You might want to go straight to your camera, for example. You might want to go to your control center. You can program that to do whatever you like. All the other features are pretty much the same as the 14 Pro, 14 Pro Max. Again, probably not overwhelming in the new features there, but as with phones these days, it's harder and harder to come up with the wow features, so you're just doing small changes, making small upgrades. In the 15 and 15 Plus, these go up from the 14 and 14 Plus. You've got the dynamic island that became very popular on the Pro phone, so that's now been incorporated into the standard range phones. You've got an updated chip, the A16 chip, up from the A15. You've got a better main camera, 48 megapixel main camera up from 12 megapixels, which also has an upgrade of the camera to 2 times optical zoom, and USB-C, of course, on there. Not supporting USB-C 3, though, supporting USB-C 2. And the glass back is now a colour-infused glass back. So, again, not revolutionary changes there, but some subtle changes I think people will appreciate.
All right, so you mentioned there a little bit of marketing with the award-winning actress that I've never heard of. That means the cost probably goes up. What is the cost of these iPhones nowadays, the 15 and your 15 Plus? We got any rough estimation on what that's going to be?
Yeah, and I won't waste your time rattling off all the prices because there's different memory size. You've got 128 gig, 256, 512, 1 terabyte. They've dropped the 2 terabyte model, so a whole range of different memory size there. Essentially, you can probably think of it that approximately the prices have gone up by about $100 per equivalent phone, which is a bit unusual. Some years they bring out the new models of phones and they're the same price. So it's actually gone up in price this time. So that's a little bit different, but you've really got to then justify what you're buying, the extra expense of that with that extra $100 on those. You've also got some new watches, if you want me to talk about those.
Yes, please.
Yep, sure. So you've got the Apple Watch Series 9, which replaces the Series 8. And again, very small changes here. You've got the amount of memory on board updated from 32 gigs to 64 gigs. That really just means you can store more music, more songs on there when you go out for your run or your bike ride, whatever it might be. They've upgraded the chips in there, the S9 chip from the S8 and the U2, the ultra-wideband chip from the U1. And the other thing that I know you'll be excited about, Rod, is that now you don't have 1,000 nits, you've got 2,000 nits. Now, before you start scratching your head, literally, then the nits refers to the brightness on the screen. So they've increased the brightness from 1,000 nits up to 2,000 nits, while still retaining the ability to drop all the way down to 1 nit. And the reason you'd want to go to very low levels of brightness is you might want to be in cinema mode, for example, not annoying everyone in the cinema with you, just checking something on your watch. And that 1 nit, gee, I reckon I'd struggle to even see 1 nit now with my old eyesight. In the Apple Watch Ultra 2, you've got similar changes there. You've got an update in the Bluetooth, up to Bluetooth 5.3, update in the chip itself, again the S9 from the S8, and the brightness has gone up from 2,000 nits, which used to be on the Ultra Watch, up to 3,000 nits on that one. Again, it can go all the way down to 1 nit. So some subtle changes there, some minor changes. You may not update from your S8 to the S9 or from your Ultra 1 to the Ultra 2, but if you had a slightly older version of the watch, then that might be enough to get you to update.
So let's stay with Apple and iPhone satellite SOS features come to the rescue in Kiwi territory.
They do indeed, and one of the things that's interesting in the launch, where again they do make it a very flash launch process. In that launch, they actually did mention the emergency features, and they actually had a brief call out to Tasmania. They just were rattling off a couple of places that you could use this feature, and Tasmania is one of those features or one of those places mentioned. But in Kiwi territory, 2 hikers were rescued using the SOS via satellite feature. We've talked about this before. This was a big announcement when the iPhone 14 was launched. And when it was first launched, it was okay if you had an emergency in the US mainland, but it didn't work outside the US mainland. But it started to grow across the world, and they started to introduce this feature across more places, and it's now available, has been for some months now, in Australia and New Zealand, and this is the first time it's been used in Australia or New Zealand. So the hikers were stranded on Arthur's Pass National Park, just northwest of Christchurch. No mobile phone service there. They got stranded. They went to make an emergency call, and that's where the satellite feature comes in. If you can't get normal mobile phone reception, it'll then use satellite to make that emergency call. It's not designed for you and I to have a chat. Oh, I'm out of range at the moment, Rod, so what's been happening? How's life going? What have you been up to? It's not designed for that. It's designed literally for emergency calls. And so this was what happened here. Emergency call was made, and then they were rescued from that. If they hadn't had that watch on them, who knows what might have happened? They may have perished. They may have been found by someone else going along that same area. It's a bit of an unknown, but it's a nice bit of security to know you've got that phone with that feature on there.
Absolutely. Now, this is a shock, an electric shock for Toyota.
Well, Toyota have been struggling, and there's been more and more discussions around some really loyal Toyota people. And there was one particular example that I saw, and this is on the New York Times, where there was a woman that had been a previous Toyota customer. The whole family was loyal to Toyota, and she's just bought herself a Chevrolet Bolt. And this is because Toyota has been lagging so far behind in electric cars. Now, one of the things that they're doing is quite interesting. You think this is a company that has been an innovator. This is a company that responded to some of the oil crises back in the 1970s in America in particular and said, we're going to produce sensible economic vehicles to try and take away some of the market from these big gas guzzlers in America. They did an exceptional job at that and really responded to what the market needed. They introduced the Prius and hybrid technology way back last century, but they really haven't gotten onto this whole electric thing. And they're losing market share. In the US, their market share dropped from 15.1% down to 13.8%. In China, their market share is dropping. BYD is having a big impact in China. But one of the things that's probably a bit frustrating is rather than Toyota say, we're behind the game, we better start innovating, they've been lobbying the government to change some of the fuel standards, for example. And this is one thing they've been focused on in the US, change their fuel standards so that it's not as attractive for people to buy electric vehicles, so that petrol vehicles, the good old-fashioned ICE vehicles, are still relevant. And it's probably a very negative way to attack the market. They really need to get out there and attack the market and try and come up with some new vehicles. They keep announcing they're going to do things. They're going to introduce 10 new all-electric vehicles by 2026. But the reality is they're so far behind now. By 2026, who knows what that company may look like?
Yep, and some cars, the tech could be spying on our private lives.
I do worry about what people get up to in their cars, but there was a particular company that said we're going to look at the privacy policies of automakers. They picked 25 major automakers and then looked at all the data that's being collected, what's being done with that data, and how healthy it is in terms of the overall health of that data. So the scary part is that out of the 25 companies that were surveyed, 19 of those sell personal data to third parties. 55% of those automakers' privacy policies permitted sharing information with government and law enforcement without a legal warrant. And then some privacy policies explicitly marked that sexual activity and sex life could be shared with other organisations. Now, I don't want to ask about your personal life, but, I don't have sex in a car, but obviously some people do. And now with cameras and microphones in cars, there is the possibility that some of that data is going to be shared, and you've agreed to share that data when you click on confirm or OK on the screen inside the car. So people probably need to have a look at this privacy policy and probably need to start to demand that some of the privacy policies for these car automakers be updated. And you probably don't think about it much, Rod, when you buy your car and you drive it around, but it is collecting a huge amount of data on you. And where is that data being shared? Well, it'd probably be nice to know about that.
Absolutely. Okay. Now, can you please explain what Spotify is on about?
Well, some people are thinking that the way to generate huge amounts of money from Spotify is to get a song put on Spotify. It's not that difficult to do that, but then just play that song over and over and over and over. You sit there on streaming for 24 hours a day. Supposedly, the story is going around on the internet, and it's on the internet, Rod, so it must be right, say that you can generate about $1,600 per month, so $400 a week basically, just by sitting a computer there and having it streaming your song all the time. Now, the Spotify CEO is a guy by the name of Daniel Ek, and so exactly as you said, he has explained that it's a little bit more than just how many times it's streamed. It looks for unique streams, it looks for a range of algorithms, because people do get paid when their music is on Spotify, for example, but it's not just as simple as streaming that over and over. So our idea, Rod, of going and putting a song together and putting it on Spotify and streaming it, well, there goes that idea for $400 a month. And you'd hope that it was a bit more complicated than that. Although, having said that, JP Morgan actually estimates that up to 10% of all streams that occur could be fake, where some people are trying to game the system. So there's probably a little bit of that happens. But if you go and dedicate a computer to that 24 hours a day, every day of the month, you might generate a few dollars, but it's certainly not going to generate $1,600 a month for you.
Well, the world does not know what they're missing out on.
That's right. With our music, Rod.
Without our song. Now, rural Aussie farm dams are the hidden batteries that could transform energy storage.
I love the fact that there are people out there working on a whole range of solutions. We've got this new economy coming, Rod, the renewable energy economy. Like it, loathe it, whatever, it's going to happen. So people are out there working on solutions. And in France, what they're doing is they're trying some little micro-pumped hydro energy systems. So rather than collect water on the roof of a building and then run that down a drain and run it out into the stormwater system, they're collecting that water and then putting a tank at the bottom of a building. They've got the tank at the top where rainwater is collected, and they're using a little pumped hydro, like the Snowy Mountain scheme, but on a micro scale. They're dropping the water down, it's spinning a generator, they're pumping it back up when they've got excess power, for example, in the middle of the day with solar. And then a bit of an investigation across the average sort of farm around Australia, and they've identified 30,000 reservoir pairs that would be suitable to generate or to store power, not generate power, to store power. And they could be used for little batteries that would be a 30 kilowatt hour battery, for example. By using these systems, there could be all of these storage systems out there, and that can be a great way to store power. And then when the sun's not shining or the wind's not blowing, that power can be put back into the grid. So it's a pretty clever system, and it could be a way for farmers to generate more off-farm income rather than just having solar panels or wind turbines. Use the dams that are already on their farm and use those to store power. It sounds very clever. I look forward to seeing how we take advantage of this and how we transition to this.
This is a good one. Now, smart toilets. Can you tell me what they're about and what they're leaking?
Well, they're leaking data, I suppose, is probably more accurate. Hopefully they're not leaking too much else. But one of the things that's interesting, we talked about cars with privacy areas. When you've got smart toilets that can analyse what's coming out of your body to look at your health, well, that data could be collected supposedly anonymously and look at the overall health of people in general. But that could also get down to the individual health of people. And for example, an insurance company might say, well, we're not going to insure these people without looking at as much data as we can. And that data could be out there available. I suppose the message here is just like the cars, have a look at what data is being collected. Have a look at the privacy policies of these companies. Now, not many people have bought a smart toilet yet, but I think more and more people will buy it. And I think it's great to be able to monitor and check your health. But suddenly if a life insurance company says, we've detected something in your smart toilet, we're not going to insure you anymore, then that could be a huge disadvantage to you for doing something that you think is a good idea, just to look at the overall health of yourself. So keep an eye on those privacy policies. Actually have a read of them. Don't just click OK to them. See what you're clicking OK to.
I'm not getting a smart toilet. Now, finally, click and stress. How is my mouse movement... Talking of movement, how is my mouse movement revealing my work woes?
Well, there's been some study done on good old AI. We can't do a segment anymore, Rob, without talking about AI somewhere. I've tried to delay it for as long as possible, but yes, AI in this segment again. When you look at AI and you look at things like your heart rate, your blood pressure, a whole range of things, that could give you some idea of how much stress someone is under. But they've actually done some testing now, looking at how much stress someone's under, looking at their mouse movements, how they use their keyboard, how they use their mouse, and they've actually found that that can be accurate at a very high level of accuracy. In fact, higher levels of accuracy than looking at things like your blood pressure and your heart rate to see how stressed you are. Now, I've seen it happen. I must admit, I don't really do it myself, but I've seen people get a bit angry and get a bit frustrated and move their mouse around a bit violently or click their mouse a bit harder, and that's obvious to a human sitting beside them. But apparently much more subtle movements of the mouse and the way you actually click on your mouse can be picked up by AI to actually say, actually, Rod needs to take a break from the computer. Rod's a bit stressed at the moment just by the way you're typing and the way you're moving your mouse. My wife sometimes says to me, it sounds like you're sending an angry email by the way I'm typing on a keyboard, and maybe that's part of it as well. Maybe my wife could be using this study because she always works out when I'm typing an angry email. So those sort of movements can be picked up, and then if you know you're stressed, that might be a chance just to take a breath, take a break, take 2 minutes away from the computer, and then come back with a bit more of a relaxed approach.
Yes, I do know that I click on my mouse, and if it's not doing what I want to do, I click faster and louder and multiple times, and it still doesn't help.
Maybe the stress is caused by the computer not being so much detected by the computer.
Could well be. I thank you for your time today.
Always my pleasure, Rod. Thank you.